In the 15 months since a violent civil war in Sudan broke out, the country has fallen into the worst hunger crisis ever recorded in the African nation. More than 10 million people have been forced out of their homes. 25.6 million people, more than half of the country's population, are facing some sort of hunger crisis. The number of people facing a hunger emergency, just a step below famine, has gone up 74% since the start of 2024. The UN says $2.7 billion in funding is needed to help the people of Sudan. As of 2 weeks ago, it's only received 18% of that. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Linda Thomas-Greenfield joins me now. Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us. Let me start to frame the conversation this way. Earlier this year, I spoke with Cameron Hudson from CSIS about the humanitarian crisis in Sudan, and he gave two main reasons for why there has been neglect in the world. He said one is that there's just too much going on the globe, from Ukraine to Israel to China to Russia, that the world can only handle so many crises at a time. And the second thing was that Sudan has had a long-standing problem in crisis in one form or another since its formation in the 50s. Do you agree with that way of framing this idea that the world has ignored this topic?
No, I know Cameron well, and I actually don't agree with that frame. I think when there are crises in the world, we have to pay attention. That's the reason you and I are talking about Sudan today. It's the reason I took a press team into Chad on the border with Sudan last year. It's the reason we're regularly engaging on Sudan and actively engaged on trying to find a political solution to end this horrific war and work to bring humanitarian assistance to the people of Sudan. There are meetings taking place right now, John, in Geneva, being led by the Secretary General's personal envoy, working with our special envoy, Tom Perriello, to bring the parties together to talk about how to address the humanitarian situation, how to get assistance to those in need, and how to find a political solution to bring the two parties together. The U.S. is the largest contributor to humanitarian assistance in Sudan, and we're working to get more assistance to address the appeal that the Secretary General referenced. More needs to be done, but we're not ignoring it.
Ambassador, tell me what you saw on that visit. Help people understand what's happening. These numbers can sometimes get abstract.
You know, what I saw, and there were a lot of press reports that came out of that visit, was despair. I saw families coming in on donkey carts from across the border. I spoke to women who had been raped. And as I have quoted many times, one telling me she had completely lost her ambition. I went into a hospital where there was an eerie silence with dozens of children laying in the bed, looking listless from starvation. And I saw so many families who just had this sense of hopelessness and despair as they fled their homes being attacked by the RSF.
I mean, one of the challenges always with aid is that you can give the money, but then the question is, are there systems in place to get it to the people who need it? Even if there were a ceasefire, is it possible to get, are there systems in place to get the aid to the most needed areas?
You know, there are. We have some amazing humanitarian organizations, from World Food Program and UNICEF to international NGOs, who are, even as the fighting continue, working to get food to people in need. If the fighting ends, they are ready and they are prepared to move forward. And it just requires these two generals to stop fighting each other and allow for assistance to get in. Just look at the Chadian border at Adre. That border has been closed by the SAF. There are agencies sitting on the Chadian side of the border waiting to go in. And so, yes, if there's a ceasefire, and there's a push right now for a ceasefire in Al-Fasher, if there's a ceasefire, I am absolutely confident that the agencies are ready to move in with resources.
Ambassador, help Americans understand the role of their nation in these kinds of instances and why there's an American interest in a place like Sudan.
You know, I like that question because what I always say about Americans is that Americans care. We actually do care about what is happening in other places around the world. We don't want to see people suffering. We don't want to see people starving. And this is a situation where we can actually make a difference. American largesse, American support, American leadership can actually make a difference in Sudan. And it can lead to the saving of lives. The other part of this is I have seen the results of our engagement. I met just recently a young Sudanese woman who was in a refugee camp in Kenya when she was 8 years old. She is now an American citizen. She's living in the United States. She's well educated. She's really an example of what can happen if a young person is given opportunity. And she got the opportunity through the U.S. resettlement program to come to the United States and actually pursue her ambitions, unlike the young woman who I met in Chad, who told me she'd lost her ambition.
UN Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield. Thank you so much, Ambassador.
Thank you so much, John.